Thanks very much for that kind introduction. It's really lovely to be here with you. And I need to first off acknowledge the traditional territory of Treaty 7 that we're gathered on. So let me start by explaining a little bit about what I do at Northern Gateway and how I think my work and the work of my team is really relevant for tonight's topic. So I have this long title. I'm a senior manager of what's called community benefits and sustainability, but thinking about things in simple terms, really, what I do is make sure that communities see lasting benefits, economic benefits from Northern Gateway. And really, supply chain management is a big part of my job because it's through managing the supply chain effectively that maximum benefits will flow to our communities. So tonight, I'm going to challenge you to think about the world of supply chain as more than just a management network of goods and services getting from distribution, from consumer to point of origin and point of consumption. Now that's all really important stuff, so please don't get me wrong, but the modern supply chain is one of the single most powerful tools that our industry has at its disposal to help families, communities, the environment, and even social health. How so, you might think? Well, clearly, working in supply chain allows you, every one of you here tonight, to create tangible and real positive change. You can direct local spend, ensure environmental standards are met, guarantee equal rights and inclusion. You can determine that the goods bought for your company and the projects that you work on are ethical, that make the lives of people better, near and afar, all through thoughtful, active, and engaged contract management practices. Now that's pretty powerful stuff, and you maybe thought you were just coming to another procurement dinner. But really, from a Northern Gateway standpoint, maximizing benefits for Northern communities isn't just the right thing to do, it's something that we have to deliver on. Of course, that's quite easy to say, and really quite harder to do. Because Northern Gateway is a big project. You may have heard a little bit about it in the news from time to time. It's a major capital project in every sense of the word. It's over 1,100 kilometers of pipeline from Edmonton to Kitimat. It includes 2 tunnels, a marine terminal, all of it greenfield, and all of it best in class. So I come to this work in a roundabout way, and I was really encouraged during the introductions thinking about supply chain as a career of choice. And I really commend the work that the educators are doing and the work that this organization is doing and bringing that to the forefront. Because like I say, I do come to this in a roundabout sort of way. I think many of us have. For about 10 years, as you know, I worked in social services, employment counseling, and even child protection. And when I decided to leave my job as a social worker and to work in the oil and gas sector, and then eventually joined the Northern Gateway team, many of my friends thought that I was totally crazy, and I think probably some still do. And you could say that I'm a recovering social worker who's found a way through corporate Canada to help communities in a different, and I think really a more sustainable way. But I was quite confident then, and I'm even more confident today, that our sector, and specifically from my point of view, Northern Gateway, has the power to transform lives and transform communities. Really, that's because Northern Gateway is a project like no other in Canadian or really North American history. Simply put, with Northern Gateway, we've learned that building a pipeline is much more than about moving product from point A to point B. It's about everything that happens in between. It's about leveraging the construction and operation of a pipeline to build and sustain healthy families for a healthy future, for communities, and really for our country. So what does all of this have to do with courage? Well, many have suggested that we're courageous for taking on this project, and it's true. There have been a few bumps along the way. But to me, the people who are showing real courage on this project are the community leaders who have seen an opportunity for their people, who are doing the hard work that is needed to identify the issues and barriers facing their community. Courage is communities facing chronic unemployment, suicide, violence, and who are taking off the blinders to deal with what's before them to better position their people and their youth for success. Because the sad reality is this: many rural, remote, isolated, and northern communities face low high school completion rates and barriers to employment, lack of basic essential skills, literacy, and really labor market isolation. These are very difficult issues, and they mean that some people in rural and remote, isolated, and northern communities need intensive support before they can even begin to work on any kind of skills training or employment readiness programs. And that's exactly what my team is doing and what my team specializes in Northern Gateway, which is skills training and employment and capacity development. And that team that's working in Northern Alberta and Northern BC is working closely with service providers, elders, community leaders in a model that we call shared responsibility. Really, it's here where we begin to understand the true issues that a community is facing, and really how those differ from other issues that other communities are facing in the North. From our assessments that the community participates with us, we work with communities to design strategies and programming that can lead to real and tangible solutions. Often that means focusing on hard things like literacy, dealing with addictions, tackling systemic issues related to poverty. Because you really simply can't ignore these deeper issues and expect community investment to work. It's not realistic. And that's where we're taking some courageous new steps and a new approach. And I'd like to say that I think that action alone, a pipeline company getting into the business of social development, really out of our comfort zone, is pretty courageous. For a company like Enbridge, on a project like Northern Gateway, to see a need and respond without really knowing how things were going to turn out. Because one thing's for sure, you can't engineer communities. But as we all know in this room, you can design good process to manage the supply chain. And I'm happy to say that the outcomes we're seeing are very encouraging. I'm going to share with you 3 examples of really how we think this approach is working. So first, Northern Gateway is working in several communities to find real real solutions to the ones that I just spoke about, using that model of shared responsibility to collaboratively create training solutions that will benefit communities. As I said, that approach is not the easy path. It takes listening, understanding, and new ways of thinking on both sides of the equation, but the benefits are unmistakable. Over the last 8 years, Northern Gateway has supported over 60 skills and capacity programs, which have directly benefited more than 2,600 people. These are programs that are inspiring First Nation, Métis, youth, and women to make new careers in areas like trades and technology. And to put it into context, that's about a $3.6 million investment. These programs have supported youth development, like the Greater Strides Leadership Camp, for more than 400 at-risk youth, many of whom are facing critical challenges in their own lives. And I like to say that this is leadership disguised as hockey. Literacy, upgrading, life skills training through the Knowledge Empowers You program in Fort St. James, BC. Foundational trades programs that help Aboriginal youth explore not just a career in trades, but a new life path forward in Terrace. And Women Building Futures, some of you may be familiar with that program in Alberta, designed right here in Alberta, being duplicated all over the country, a program that helps women overcome personal and social issues to achieve sustainable careers in non-traditional sectors. This is all well before a single shovel has been put on the ground in our project, well before hardly a contract has been let. By doing this, we're helping to open new doors for thousands of Northerners, and we make good on the commitment that we have made to communities. These skills that we're working on will last a lifetime, transforming lives, strengthening communities, and building capacity and skills that will be handed down through the generations. As a Métis woman and a mother of 2 Aboriginal children, the second example that I want to share with you is really close to my heart. Northern Gateway is a true partnership with Aboriginal communities, an actual equity partnership where those First Nation and Métis communities have a stake in the success of our project and really in the decisions that shape our future. One of the best and most comprehensive benefit packages in Canadian history, worth over $1 billion, inclusive of equity, employment, business opportunities, and community investment. 26 communities are equity partners in the project, representing over 60% of the Aboriginal communities along the right-of-way, all of whom want to see themselves in the picture of the supply chain for this project through contracting, procurement, and joint ventures. Yes, we have more work to do with Aboriginal communities, especially in British Columbia. There's no question to that. We need to build further trust and understanding, and we're prepared to do that. We have made extraordinary progress. We've broken some new ground and established some new business models that invite Aboriginal people to the table early in the process. Many have said that this could not be done, and many still do. But we're keeping to our vision, and we have great partners who are sticking to theirs. I want to leave you with a final example because I think it shows how our project is different and speaks directly to issues about how we manage the supply chain to support better outcomes. We expect to invest $1.5 billion in communities in northern British Columbia and northern Alberta. $1.5 billion. Think of the potential that money has to help to grow local businesses, develop new capacities, and train new workers. It's a historic opportunity, but only if we have the courage to ask more of ourselves and have the courage to ask more of our suppliers, much more than we have in the past. That means leveraging the supply chain to help us meet the goals that we have set for our project. It means working with every supplier to see that they dig deeper into their own supply chains to improve outcomes and maximize the value of every dollar spent to the communities and the environment. This is where creativity comes in, and it's also where the courage is needed to do things differently. Every supplier for Northern Gateway will have to provide a robust socioeconomic plan as part of their bid package to show how they will maximize social and economic benefits and how they plan to execute the delivery of those commitments. This plan will be weighted and scored just as cost and quality and safety. That's how serious we are about the supply chain and how we will manage that to achieve our goals. And our team will work closely with those suppliers to turn those plans from words on paper to real benefits for real people, because those plans will be managed through the supply chain. Already more than 2,000 people have added their names to our online database saying they want to work on our project. And a few weeks ago in Prince George, we hosted a business summit. We brought together businesses from diverse areas who wanted to learn from each other about the goals that we have for our project and the expectation that we have for our suppliers. More than 300 businesses were represented in Prince George. Many of them were Aboriginal. It was really tremendous to see. So we have set very high standards for our suppliers, but we've set very high standards for ourselves, because we have a real opportunity to peel back the layers of the supply chain to see that Northern Gateway isn't only a pipeline, but also a catalyst for lasting and meaningful change in communities. Underpinning our entire approach is the belief in communities and an understanding that they are the best stewards of their collective futures. This approach requires true partnership with communities and suppliers. It takes resolve to do things differently. Companies can't just come through town with the promise of a few jobs and a donation to a local charity to be successful. That's really an old way of doing business. And I think that our project has helped us all to move beyond that way of thinking. In today's Canada, companies like Northern Gateway have to leverage every opportunity to enable communities and people to make the most of the opportunity, to control their own destiny, to build a sustainable future. Because at the end of the day, that's what a project like Northern Gateway is really all about, the future. A better, brighter future for all British Columbians, for all Albertans, and really for all Canadians. And everyone in this room has the power to make that happen, to use economic development projects like Northern Gateway to create lasting and meaningful change. But to get there takes determination, focus, and really, above all else, the courage to chart a new path and to do the right thing. I think you would all agree with that. So thank you for allowing this social worker to have a few minutes to talk about supply chain. I appreciate the opportunity very much, and I understand that I'm going to take some easy questions, and all of the tough questions I'm going to let my friend Bernard take. He's just been put on the spot for that, so thank you. Yeah, I think I get where you're going. So the question was really around how we balance local and Aboriginal inclusion, and also some of the needs that we have from the contractual piece, right? So safety, quality. So we've been working on this project. This is hard to imagine. We've been working on this project for almost 12 years, 10 years, 11 years before we got federal approval. And so during that time, one of the real benefits that we've been able to do is work with local communities around preparation, and a lot of that work has been undertaken, especially in the last 18 months. So we've done a lot of investments with small and local Aboriginal business around increasing their capacity. We've actually funded a number of Aboriginal businesses to go through our pre-qualification process. As you all know, that can be quite an expensive process. But we've funded that to identify areas where they might not make it, or where they're not going to make it, and then help them to resource bringing up those qualifications. Now, that doesn't just mean us paying for it, right? Because if money was the answer, we would have solved this problem a long time ago. It's really the power of partnership. So what we've done is looked for other resources and connected those resources back to community. And the other part of it, I think, is there's a lot of power in joint venture and helping to create a space for businesses to get to know each other for the subcontracting. So with Northern Gateway, we expect to have a major general contractors, and then there will be an expectation that they would hire local. But safety is non-negotiable, right? You got to have it. So we'll help you to get there, but you have to have some skin in the game too.
Further to your comments, thank you, Brandis. Further to your comment around joint venture relationships and partnerships developed with your main contractors and the Aboriginal groups in the area, how is Enbridge going about the contractors engaging in those relationships? Is it an expectation through a bid process? Can they have joint ventures established beforehand, or what would be Enbridge's recommendation or ask of those contractors to develop those relationships?
So I talked a little bit about the socioeconomic plan, and part of the socioeconomic plan, what we've done is complete a section that identifies communities that are located within a certain spread or a geographic area in the pipeline business. We talk about spreads. And so we've identified the geographic area and the communities that are in the geographic area. So we would expect that our bidders, those that are submitting a bid, would in fact have established some of those relationships in advance. So that's one avenue. Also, tools like the Business Summit that we talked about, so creating a space for some of those advanced relationships. Many of the Aboriginal and local communities that we're working with have really advanced partnerships, so that's great. They're bringing partners to us. I talked about the equity partners, so our Aboriginal equity partners are getting to know some of the general contractors, early days, but they are getting to know them, starting to formulate those relationships. And clearly it's going to be a big component of successful contracting on our project is those relationships. The database. So I think what's important is we set the goals, the objectives, and the vision, but then we also have to resource community so that they can be effective. And we have to also resource the contractors, right? Because we're talking about forging this new path and doing business in the Canadian context in a new way. Well, a lot of the contractors that we work with, this is a new way of doing business. So we have to create a space for them as well. And those are the tools that we're trying to put in place for that. There's a professor in supply chain going to ask a social worker supply chain question. Media, they didn't have me ready for this, but okay.
So, no, it's more of a social, I hope, broader question. So it's not very technical. Okay. So from your time in the job, can you give us a sense longitudinal of the how the relationship with the communities have evolved, issues that may have been solved, issues that are still pending. How do you see that evolving over time as well?
Yeah, so I think your question was specific to Aboriginal people and the evolution. You know, it's really interesting. So I left social work in 2004 and came into the oil and gas sector, and you know, really out of my league. And that whole experience taught me a lot about vulnerability and about learning new things. But what I think I've seen is, and it's different in the Alberta context, right? Because for the communities that we're working with in British Columbia, the oil and gas experience, pipelines, energy, is notwithstanding the Treaty 8 area around Fort Nelson, Fort St. John is different. The context is different. I think the relationship, the ongoing relationship with the Crown is changing, or I think is continuing to evolve, might be a better way of saying that. Aboriginal communities have a really high capacity of engaging with oil and gas companies. They're very familiar with our business now, which is good. I think learning every day. And I think what we see from the Northern Gateway context is that Indigenous communities are partners in development and not obstacles. And so even though in the news you may hear a lot of talk about opposition in Northern Gateway, and there is indeed some of that, we have a lot of partners in this project who've accepted our premise of being partners. So I think when I think about what's changed over the last 10 years, it's the partnership. Aboriginal communities want and deserve to be at the rightful place in the Canadian economy. I think everybody would agree with that here. There's benefits that far reach into all areas. So I think that's a big change. Not that they want to be part of the economy, but there's better representation within.
Hi there, sorry, just a quick question. What kind of, I guess, programs do you have in place for Aboriginal women, and have they been targeted specifically for, I don't know, anything that you guys have going?
Yes, so I have a team, and I have Aboriginal women on our team who are particularly interested in maximizing Aboriginal women in the trades. So we've funded Aboriginal women in trades programs. We've also worked in community around upgrading essential skills. Aboriginal women, and women in general, face different challenges, right? Working in our sector, camps and camp life. Those challenges come into play. I know as a mom, it'd be really hard for me to be away for 2 or 4 weeks at a time for a shift. So that's a challenge. But we kind of look at, within the Northern Gateway context, how do we build skills in the North more broadly that are going to be sustainable and really they can be transferable into other areas. So camps and catering, and I'm not suggesting that's the only area, okay, because I know that it sounds stereotypical, women in camps and catering. But really, you know, you can become a Red Seal chef from your experience in a camps and catering facility. You can learn management skills. You can probably even learn supply chain management skills, right? So, I mean, really, I think there's tremendous opportunity, highly transferable. So, Women Building Futures as well, great program that we were able to sponsor here in Alberta. Focused on readiness for non-traditional roles. So it's an important area. It's an area that we can tap into. And we're really community driven. So we try to sit down with communities. We do sit down with communities that tell us where they want to go. Quite often, it's interesting, one of the areas that's coming up more and more is around early childhood education and helping to support learning for early childhood. So I think that could be a sustainable solution for a lot of communities and for a lot of women. So the question was kind of the granular level, and how do you know what's there, and how do you, that was a foundational piece of the work that we did when we developed the education and training strategy for Northern Gateway. So we've been investing in skills training since 2006, but in 2011 we kind of redoubled our efforts and focused on developing a strategy that would help us tackle what you're talking about, which is what are the skills and how do we best resource those. Because what we were finding is, you know, what I spoke about, a lot of interest in working in our sectors, but a lot of challenges around basic literacy and high school completion. So we went out to market, we found some of the best people in the business that could help communities complete assessments and identify current challenges, and then resource those. Again, that model of partnership, so bringing educators and industry and health and social services to the table, and then designing a program from that. Quite often what we found to be really powerful is we'll help a community identify all of the resources in their, resource companies in their area, bring them to the table and talk about, so, okay, rail, what have you got for job opportunities? Energy could be warehousing. What have you got in up and coming for opportunities, and what are the skills that are needed? Okay, so you've got a lot of well opportunities in your region. Okay, so you need well operators. So what is that going to look like? Sometimes we have to go back multiple layers, assessments, education, job experience, work placement, follow-up. I mean, folks, this is, there's no Hail Mary pass for this or silver bullet. It's really one person at a time.
It seems to me that everything that you talked about revolves also about communication. So communicating with your partners and with the Aboriginal people. So what was the process that you put in place to make sure that you had that open line of communication with the partners in all levels? How did you reach the goal that you wanted to get the information you need to put the process in place?
I think that communication is probably still our single most largest challenge with this project. We were having a conversation at the table here before dinner about sometimes our opponents will use a really emotional level debate to connect with people. And it could be false information, but it's emotional and it can really connect with people. And one of the things that we've learned in our industry, and I think we'll continue to learn, is that we need to be able to speak back to people in a way that's real, right? We like to talk about science, and we like to talk about fact, and we like to talk about safety, but we need now to be more connected on the emotional side. So things like coffee chats, living room meetings. I mean, can you imagine? Northern Gateway is meeting with people in their living rooms in Northern British Columbia. We have open houses and technical sessions. We've done live simulcast chats. I mean, really, if you have new ideas, bring it on, because we're looking for it. Any opportunity that we can to better enhance our communication is critical, but you couldn't have said it better. It's the key to success, so absolutely.
I'm curious, after the 10 years you've been there and you're starting to see probably a younger generation coming in, are you seeing the results of your efforts starting to kind of quicken the pace and get more youth buying in and more encouraged to be a participant?
If I put that in the BC context, I think what we've seen, we were speaking about this before dinner as well, is a real change. When we started this project and engaging on this project and working on this project, the landscape was different, especially in northern British Columbia. That area at the time was in a real recession. There was a lot of challenges with the economy. There was more workers than jobs. And what we've seen, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, is LNG is big, right? And so it's coming to a theater near you in Prince Rupert or Kitimat. It's really taken over the market. It's taken over the conversation. We've seen Rio Tinto Alcan do the modernization project. Lots of workers needed. We've seen Kitimat boom. So there's been a real change in the socioeconomic dynamics of the communities. I would say that we are seeing the fruits of our labor. They're small often because it's small cohorts of groups, but I'm thinking about a group of iron workers here in northern Alberta that we helped, one of our first programs, get off the ground, and we have just happens to be 2 Aboriginal iron workers who are now mentoring other students in northern Alberta. For me, that's great success. It's really powerful stuff.
Catherine, that was a fantastic speech, certainly very engaging from the standpoint of hand-to-hand implication and involvement. We think in our world of complex supply chains, being hard work and dealing with suppliers and customers, but certainly what Enbridge has exemplified here is bringing it to a whole new level. So we wanted to thank you for coming out this evening. And we had a token of appreciation here, if I could just find it, Peter, somewhere. Well hidden for you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanking you very much for
Thank you.
stepping in for Janet. Thank you.